Christy Martin laid motionless on the floor. She had been stabbed at least 8 times, beaten nearly unconscious, and then shot in the chest, just 3 inches from her heart, with her own pink gun that she kept underneath the bed. Her husband Jim Martin taunted her for nearly an hour, gurgling on her own blood as she tried to breathe. Christy was the first woman to sign with the boxing promoter Don King. "The Lady is a Champ" was the headline when she became the first woman on Sports Illustrated. A career stretching over 2 decades with 49 wins and 32 of those coming by knockout. Just a few months earlier, she had become the second ever WBC Women's Super Welterweight champ. She was used to fighting and usually came out on top. November 23rd, 2010 would be no different. At some point she shouts, "Motherfucker, you can't kill me." When her husband Jim goes to shower and dye his hair after she had fallen unconscious, or at least he thought, Christy calls on her body to move through one more fight. She struggles to her feet, covered in blood, and stumbles out of the house. Even with her calf muscle sliced by the knife, she manages to stop a passing car that takes her to the emergency room. This is just another day in the wild life of Christy Martin. Christy Martin's story starts from humble beginnings. The town of Edmond, West Virginia, most recently the population was 259 people in 2020. It's a mining town that produced nearly 30 million tons of coal, but after an explosion on December 16, 1972, the population began to decline. Before that, on June 12, 1968, Christy was born to Joyce and Johnny Salters. Johnny was a welder in the coal mines. Both of her grandfathers had also been coal miners. Her younger brother Randy also worked in the coal mines until he was injured. In an interview with ESPN, Christy would call her family plain, stating, "We don't like to put on airs. We just like to be plain and happy." Christy grew up loving sports, often the only girl on her team. Baseball, football, basketball, but even before she got to boxing, she liked to fight. Still, she excelled in sports. But it wasn't until 7th grade that she would play on a girls' basketball team. She got a scholarship to Concord University and wanted to use the opportunity to become a coach. While in college, she entered into a tough man contest, which was like an underground, low-key illegal MMA fight. She won, easily. She got booked for a professional boxing bout, despite never having trained before. She was supposed to just get beat up and make the opponent, Angela Buchanan, look good. They should have paid her to lose, because to quote Martin, "I beat the shit out of that girl." They called it a draw. A boxing promoter recommended she get some real training and make a career of it. Christy showed up to the man's gym with her mother and met the head coach, Jim Martin. He didn't want to train her, because he didn't believe women had a place in boxing. Christy left, telling her mom that the man was crazy, but her mother convinced Christy to go back. Jim would later joke with reporters, "I had it all set up to have her ribs broke, a couple of ribs anyway, but the boss shows up and the guy who invited her to the gym, so I thought I'd put that off for a couple of days. How would it look if her ribs were broke right away?" See what I'm saying? Over the next 2 years, Christy would rack up victory after victory in vicious fashion, often knocking out her opponents. During those 2 years, she'd also get married to Jim, who was 25 years older than her. The 90s were a good time for women's boxing. It really started to take off and get respect. In 1993, Christy Martin signed with Don King, a Hall of Fame boxing promoter who has managed Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, Larry Holmes, Roy Jones Jr., and so many more. What set Christy apart was 2 things. First, she understood the media. Even before Don King, she had branded herself the coal miner's daughter, because we love a good story in sports. The second is she would knock her opponents out, once stating, "Why go 10 rounds? I get paid the same if I knock you out in the first." She would start getting as much as $350,000 for a fight, which doesn't seem like much considering multi-million-dollar paydays now, but at the time, this was unheard of money. After her legendary match with Deirdre Gogarty saw Christy have her nose split open in the 3rd round, but still pull out a win, all kinds of offers came in. Talk shows, an episode of Roseanne, magazines, and everything else but the saying goes, more money, more problems. Jim would constantly plant the idea that everyone hated her in Christy's head. He would force her to weigh herself 3 times a day in front of him. He took control of her money while splurging on himself. He hid surveillance cameras in their home to show his friends videos and pictures of Christy in unflattering, private, and intimate moments. When she found out, he threatened to show them to everyone, including her father. Christy would start to use cocaine to cope with the abuse, and Jim would use it to keep her in the relationship long after she wanted out. When Christy would put a gun to her head, he'd try to convince her to pull the trigger. When she would attempt to overdose, he'd offer her more drugs. Every day, Jim would promise Christy, "I'll kill you if you leave me." Abusers seek out people who are in pain, and they use that pain to make their lives worse. Long before Christy met Jim, she was in pain. To quote Christy, "I've been hiding who I truly am since I was 12. See, in 8th grade, Christy met Sherry Lusk. They played on the same basketball team. They loved each other, but 2 women loving each other in West Virginia at the time, it couldn't be done. The day before their wedding, Jim called Christy's father, Johnny, to tell him that Christy had cheated on him with a woman. Jim said he didn't want her anymore. According to him, Christy's father said, "We don't want her either." And to be fair, Christy didn't want Jim, but she did want a family. And at the time, she needed a man for a family. So they got married. Not out of love, but convenience. And for 18 long years, Jim harbored that jealousy for Christy, excelling in a sport he had failed in. In March of 2010, Christy got a message on Facebook. "Hi, how are you doing?" It was from Sherry Lusk. Christy told Sherry everything. Lusk repeatedly urged her to leave, but Christy was afraid. On November 18th, they would meet in person at a cafe. Some places say this was a date or an affair, but Christy and Sherry both deny this. Sherry has stated repeatedly she just wanted to help a friend out of a bad situation. For Christy's part, she stated, "I used to think I loved Sherry, but I didn't. Not really. I was in love with how it felt being me." And Christy needed help. A month before meeting in person, Christy had told Jim she wanted a divorce. Jim would blow up her phone with threatening messages. When the two met again on the 22nd of November, Jim would call Christy. "I followed you," leading to Christy and Sherry hiding in a hotel. The last thing she would tell Sherry is, "This motherfucker's gonna shoot me." And on November 23rd, 2010, he did. He shot her in the chest, 3 inches from her heart, stabbed her 8 times, sliced her calf from top to bottom, severing the veins, muscles, and tendons. Her lung was punctured. Her ear had to be reattached. There were multiple cuts and spots with internal bleeding, and doctors weren't sure she would ever walk again. When she was awake, she looked to her mom and said, "I told you he was crazy." The next time Christy would see Jim, she was testifying during his trial. Despite doctors being unsure if she'd ever walk again, she walked down from the witness stand, leaned over the table until she was eye to eye with Jim. Security was prepared to rush her, but she would only say, "I hope you rot in hell, you motherfucker." The prosecution got matching mugs with the quote on it. She defied doctors and walked again, but Christy has that dog in her, because she would go on to have 2 more professional fights. She would lose one because she broke her hand and couldn't continue. How hard do you have to hit somebody to break your hand? With boxing gloves on, come on now. Her final match would be a loss to Mia St. John in the last round. She'd headlined the first class of women in the International Women's Boxing Hall of Fame and promoted dozens of fights since retirement. She also fell in love again. In a strange turn of events, Christy would meet her wife Lisa for the first time in 2001, when Christy would beat her by unanimous decision in a boxing match. Christy has had an incredible life. Unfortunately, it's forever intertwined with the horrors of abuse that still leave her with PTSD today. In an interview with ESPN, Christy revealed that sometimes she wants to visit Jim in prison. He's had a stroke since sentencing, and is still trying to grasp a little of her fame, even trying to sell his prison ID on eBay. Christy keeps a list of questions she'd like to ask him, the number one question being, when was the exact moment you decided to kill me? Despite the horrors, Christy wouldn't trade it. She said, I wish I wouldn't have ever met him, but then I would never have been the boxer that I am. I should have been willing to leave everything and be happy, but I wasn't there yet.